Hello fellow wand lovers. Or are you perhaps wand curious? I'm Cathy, the person who caused this. Techter has been my favorite class since 2017. It evolved quite a bit in New Genesis. In this guide I'll dive as deep as possible into Techter, while presenting all the information in a digestible way. Hopefully you'll learn a thing or three, and become the Techter you're meant to be. Techter is a returning class in PSO2 New Genesis. It is geared for close and long-range combat with wands and talises respectively. Techters can also support allies through Shifta/Deban, Overemphasis, Resta Signa, and Elemental Downs. Wands are melee weapons with heavy-hitting photon arts, elemental properties, and ability to cast techniques. They're nothing like your Wizarding World wooden stick wands. Normal attacks are one of wands' primary ways of inflicting damage. They have cancel timings, allowing you to cancel the attack midway through, in order to dodge. Additionally, the third step of the normal attack combo has frontal guard frames, protecting you from attacks from the front. Blocking this way applies 12 frames of hit stop though. With the wand attack extra skill, the normal attack combo gets extended by one step. The fourth step of the normal attack combo is very long compared to the other three. However, the entire animation has 360-degree guard frames, protecting you during the entire animation. You can also go into the fourth step of the normal attack combo using the skill, Wand Technique Skip Beat. This skill allows you to use a normal attack after a charge technique, which has very strong gap and elevation closing abilities, and can be chained into the fourth step of the normal attack combo immediately. It is recommended to use Skip Beat every time you need to use a charge technique, as it is a very powerful attack. The fourth step of the normal attack combo should only be used for PP restoring purposes though. Wand Lovers is Wand's active ability. It adds guard frames to the first and second normal attack, removes hit stop on the third normal attack, and negates knockback and launches. With the Wand Lover's Line Force skill, the speed and potency of all normal attacks increases as well, including Wand Technique Skip Beat and both of our counter attacks. Your normal attacks will have a stronger gap close than usual and track enemies vertically too. The Wand Weapon action is our dedicated block button. You can cancel out of most of your attacks to initiate a block. Even techniques have cancel timings. With the Wand Parry Counter skill, the weapon action becomes easily one of our strongest attacks, due to the counter follow-up this skill provides. Parry counters are further enhanced with Wand Parry Counter Advanced. This skill adds a shockwave to your counter attack, allowing you to hit and pierce targets that may be very far away. NGS is a counter-heavy game, so it is very important to learn the timings of this button. We also have a sidestep counter, which avoids grab attacks at a cost of being short range. It's important to try out both counter maneuvers, and learn which one is more useful in which situation. For example, a Kusabujin has a grab attack that will grab you through your parry counter. In this situation, you must use the sidestep counter instead. Swift Smash is our strongest non-counter based attack. However, it has a charge time of 1 second, in which time you're very vulnerable. It is important to know when you can safely charge up this attack. Both uncharged and charged Swift Smash close in the distance on the target, and both have frontal guard frames upon execution. However, guarding with the uncharged version causes 8 frames of hit stop. If you precharge Swift Smash, meaning you charge it up while the enemy isn't in attack range, the DPS skyrockets. Because of this, it is very important to precharge Swift Smash whenever the opportunity presents itself. For example, in Quarries, dolls like to teleport around. That's your cue. You can reduce the fall speed while charging Swift Smash with the slow landing charge skill. This skill is vital for aerial combat and airborne weak points. However, some Arcs defenders choose to not use this skill, in order to maximize damage from the Encore Jump add-on skill. This is only important for speedrunning though, so don't worry about it. Just make sure you smash swiftly. Don't look at me, Hornian came up with these names. Wave Crash covers the AoE department, but it's still okay for single target play. The PA has some decent range, but it is very PP hungry. Letting the full attack play out is, unfortunately, a slight DPS loss compared to just canceling it midway through, after the first hit. The attack has immunity to knockback and launch effects, but it has no guard frames to protect yourself from incoming attacks. You need to cancel the attack using the weapon action if you want to protect yourself when surrounded by enemies, and the first hit is not cancelable. In order to make both of the Photon arts more PP sustainable, Wand Art's skip attack allows you to use normal attacks after using any 2 Photon arts. This skips directly to the 3rd normal attack, and goes right over to the 4th normal attack afterwards, which recovers a large chunk of PP. 2 swift smashes followed up by the 3rd and 4th normal attack are PP neutral. Any natural or offensive PP recovery buff makes this PP positive. Not only that, but every attack in this combo has frontal guard frames, so it is a very safe and sustainable way of attacking the enemies. Wave Crash is slightly PP negative, and protects you less from incoming damage. With Skip Attack you lower your damage for PP sustainability, therefore you should use it when running out of PP. However, if you have Wand Lovers active, Skip Attack becomes slightly better from a DPS perspective than just using Photon Arts, since the 4th normal attack benefits greatly from Wand Lovers. Wand Guard Reflection causes a level 1 Photonic Fury each time you block an attack via guard frames. This includes all guard frames I've mentioned throughout this video. Weapon action, normal attacks, swift smash, and even uncharged Jifoy start dealing extra damage. This is a very vital skill. Wand Element Change enhances both normal attacks and Photon Arts, by allowing you to change the element of your Photonic Furies by charging techniques. This allows you to inflict both physical down and elemental down at the same time, as well as gain a slight damage boost, as long as you match your elements with enemy weaknesses. Elementless Photonic Furies inflict physical down instead. Both Elementless and Elemental Furies build up Techter resources at the same rate, so there is no need to worry about that. If you want to go back to Elementless Photonic Furies in order to inflict more physical down, Wand Element Revoke is here for you. Simply hold the weapon action button and your Furies will revert to Elementless. You do lose a tiny bit of DPS, but you can't build up Elemental Down factor during Elemental Downs, so in some situations going Elementless is very beneficial. However, Wand Element Pursuit changed the game entirely. When the pursuit meter is filled, holding the weapon action button causes a powerful attack while discharging your imbued element. This is a very important tool that you should use as soon as it charges up. Every attack that causes Photonic Furies contributes to the buildup of the pursuit gauge. Photonic Furies have 3 different levels depending on which action you perform. The key difference between them is their down values and how quickly they build resources. Because of this, it's important to focus on attacks that cause level 3 Photonic Furies. Talises are devices equipped on the arm that allow Techters to cast techniques in different behaviors, depending on deployment status from Talis Photon Arts. They're a great weapon to inflict damage at a distance, and melt groups of enemies. They're also the best weapon to start petty debates on Reddit. Yes, single target Talis damage is a bit underwhelming. However, that really doesn't matter outside of speedrunning, and most speedrunning challenges are self-imposed anyway. Just use whatever weapon you like. But before I start, I'd like to point out that Talis works slightly better on Force than on Techter. That shouldn't discourage you from using Talis on Techter though. Unlike Rifle, which is shared between Gunner and Ranger, Talis is treated properly on both classes. Talis normal attacks are a bit unremarkable. They are purely for PP recovery and sidestep counters. The Talis weapon action places a Talis above your position. This Talis shoots automatically by itself, and recovers 2 PP per shot. It greatly helps with PP sustainability during Talis gameplay, and benefits from offensive PP recovery boosts. The weapon action does have invincibility frames, and can be used for evasion, but it's unable to cancel techniques, and can be unreliable because of it. You need to rely on Talis sidestep counters, in order to protect yourself from incoming damage, since they are able to cancel technique attacks, making them far more reliable and less clunky. If you don't use any directional input while placing the Talis via weapon action, Floating Pillbox Multirock will instead place 3 Talises, which spread the damage to 3 targets, and recover 1 PP for each of them. The damage and resource buildup doesn't increase, as it splits them equally. The key advantage here is that you restore more PP in total. Overall, I find this skill very unhelpful, and in some situations detrimental. For example, in boss fights you'd want to place a regular Talis, since there is only 1 target. However, if you're not actively moving, because someone else has aggro, you might cast Multirock by accident. Furthermore, 1 PP extra in mobbing situations really isn't that much. I prefer to skip this skill entirely. Convergence Shot unleashes a singular piercing shot that blooms your Talis formation. Techniques are altered during Talis formation, becoming single-target elemental bullets for 20 seconds. These are your main bread and butter for single-target Talis DPS. Spread Shot unleashes 2 shockwaves, mowing down your surrounding enemies. Talis bloom formation will be altered depending on which shockwave was used last. If you stop the photon art midway through, techniques cast from this formation will shoot 3 wide bullets in front of you. If you let the PA finish, techniques will instead shoot a shockwave around you, hitting any enemy nearby. This is the strongest tool we have available to deal with groups of mobs. The AoE shockwaves and techniques also have some guard frames, meaning you're a little bit protected while using them. Overall, this is a great AoE tool with a frankly absurd range. Both of these formations last for 20 seconds. Once a Talis Bloom formation expires, Talis Bloom after PP gain recovers PP, based on the amount of techniques cast. You recover 4 PP for every technique casted, capped at 60 PP. So, you should refresh your deployment every 15 shots or about every 8.5 seconds. It's worth noting that reblooming a Talis formation, while the previous one is still active, will reduce the cost of the PA to 0, while restoring the full PP amount. You still need to have the PP needed to perform the PA, it just won't be consumed. Also, changing weapons through the multi-weapon system immediately ends a bloom formation, restoring your PP in the process. With the Talis Bloom Revoke skill, pressing and holding the weapon action button will forcefully cancel your bloom formation. Useful for when you want to swap out of deployment into regular techniques. Usually only used when you want to initiate compound techniques, and their respective follow-up techniques. Tricky Capacitor is Talis's active ability. Attacking with a Talis builds the Tricky Capacitor gauge. Consuming it allows you to do a special long-range attack, which deals heavy damage and recovers a lot of PP. You're also fully invincible during the attack. The Tricky Capacitor Gauge Amplifier skill speeds up the buildup of Tricky Capacitor significantly. Matching the attack element of deployed techniques to the enemy elemental weakness nearly triples the buildup speed. This is an insane boost that is basically unconditional, since we'd be matching elemental weaknesses for the damage boost anyway. Tricky Capacitor becomes even better with the Tricky Capacitor Bloom Flourish skill. This skill changes Tricky Capacitor depending on what deployment formation you currently have active. During Convergence formation, Tricky Capacitor changes into an attack that spawns cards above the target, letting them rain down to inflict damage. This is mainly a boost to the attack's accuracy, now acting as a hitscan attack. During Spread formation, the skill becomes either a frontal cone or circular AoE, depending on which of the 2 formations you're using. This allows Tricky Capacitor to double as an AoE burst damage button. Talis Sign Marking boosts the damage of deployed techniques by 5% when attacking a marked enemy. To mark an enemy, simply hit it with weapon action or normal attacks. Smaller enemies won't survive long enough for this to trigger, however, against bosses it helps your DPS a lot. Techniques are yet another important tool in our repertoire. Techters don't use techniques as their main form of damage, however, we still have use for them in our combos. Techters cast techniques when setting a wand element after a revoke, want to fix their elevation with wand technique skip beat, or want to follow up on compound techniques by popping elemental gimmicks. Setting the element after a revoke sort of invokes a technique phase. I usually don't do this, but for the sake of explanation I'll have to pull up some DPS numbers to better visualize what I mean. Every action has a set duration and power distribution. Calculating that into a single number is called damage per second, or DPS for short. I'll link my personal DPS Excel sheet down in the description below. So, usually when reapplying an element onto your wand, you'd go for a charge technique, right? Let's take Ver.2 for example. Ver.2, by itself, is 333 DPS. This is way below our PA damage. For example, Charged Swift Smash is 399 DPS and Wave Crash, cancelled midway through, is 387 DPS. So, reapplying an element looks like a DPS loss on the surface. Now let's average the damage out with Skip Beat. That attack is 411 DPS, and can only be activated as a follow-up to a charge technique. So, if you average it out with our Ver.2, it becomes 380 DPS. Much better. However, we have elemental gimmicks. We can push this further. If we cast 4 uncharged Ver.2s, we'll apply an Ice Sigil onto an enemy. We could go further and try to get the stronger version of the sigil, but for Techters it's fine to just use the regular one. Now, with the Ice Sigil applied, our charged Ver.2 deals a whopping 554 DPS. Now that's juicy. Once we average the damage out, we'll have an overall DPS of 407. An increase of 27 DPS. However, despite that, I only recommend doing this tech phase once per revoke. For example, if we average out the damage of Revoke and Swift Smash, we'll get approximately 447 DPS. So what do we learn from this? When reapplying an element, it is beneficial to go into a technique phase, in order to maximize our damage, but when the element is applied, it's important to focus on revoking that element. If you're skilled enough, you can even juggle the two resources. In fact, Einhander has made a really neat video demonstrating that playstyle. I'll link it below if you want to watch it for yourself. Techniques also have cancel timings with wand weapon action, so it's very easy to protect yourself from incoming damage when using them. Compound techniques are actions exclusive to Force and Techter weapons. These techniques need to be charged up via regular techniques, Talis techniques, and Photonic Furies. All three use the same gauge, but are on separate cooldowns. The gauge can stock up 2 charges, meaning you can hold 1 charge until an opportunity shows up. The skill, United Techniques Gauge Amplify, improves charge speed of compound techniques by 30%. It even stacks with Force's equivalent skill. Compound techniques aren't affected by elemental damage multiplier, so matching enemy weakness is less important. However, they only apply elemental down factor to their respective elements, and fully charge your elemental gimmicks for follow-up techniques, so it is still recommended to match elements when using them. Fomelgen applies Foibrand to all targets and supplies you with 3 Megid spheres. Foibrand can be detonated with any fire technique, charged or not. It is generally recommended to use either uncharged Foy or charged Jifoy. Charged Foy is more of an AoE attack and thus not super strong as a Fomelgen follow-up. However, it charges up quicker than Jifoy, so there is that to consider. Building Foibrand without the help of Fomelgen takes a little bit too long for a dedicated tech phase, so don't stress about the brand and just use a charged Gifoy when reapplying the element. Megid Sphere can be consumed using a charged Dark technique. Gimagid is your go-to technique for that. Regular Megid is an AoE attack and therefore a bit weaker, just like charged Foy. Without the help of Fomelgen, it takes 3 uncharged Gimagids to build 3 spheres for a dedicated tech phase. Barancian applies a rank 2 Ver.2 blot while supplying you with Grant's Glitter. The character animation is a little shorter than the attack itself, so don't swap your weapon, otherwise the attack will stop dealing damage. Ver.2 blot is also not applied until the technique ends, so you need to keep yourself busy until the attack ends. Using a charged ice technique causes Ver.2 blot to explode, dealing tons of damage in the process. Jabarta is slightly stronger than Ver.2, but harder to aim. We already went through an ice element tech phase in an earlier example, so I won't repeat myself here. While Grant's Glitter is active, using light techniques will cause additional attacks, depending on the technique. This is probably the weakest elemental gimmick for Techters, as it doesn't provide any useful follow-up attack for Barancian, and sustaining the buff is rather difficult since it only lasts 10 seconds. Similarly to Foibrand, don't stress about it and just use a charged Grants or Gigrants to reapply your wand element. Zandian applies Zond Gale and charges you up with Zond Clad. Unlike the other two, you become invincible the moment you press the technique, so it's a nice panic button. Zondclad improves your next charged lightning technique by boosting its damage by approximately 50%. Both Zond and Gazond are fantastic candidates for a Zandian follow-up. While Zond is easier to aim with, Gazond is stronger. Lightning techniques fit into wand gameplay really well. You can leave an uncharged Gazond between your regular wand gameplay and let it hit your enemy 10 times. This will cause a natural Zondclad effect, allowing you to charge up a technique for some great damage. This is further complemented by Revoke Pursuit and Technique Skip Beat, and I really recommend using both techniques when fighting enemies weak to lightning. Zon Gale activates upon using a charged wind technique, causing additional attacks. Gizzen is a much better follow-up than Zon in boss scenarios. This tech phase is short and sweet, requiring just one uncharged Gizzen, followed up by a charged one. Between all the compound follow-ups, I recommend using Ice, Lightning, and Dark Element follow-ups, regardless if the enemy is weak to their elements or not. Fire and Wind follow-ups should only be used against enemies weak to those elements. Photon Blasts aren't unique to Techter, but Techter builds them up the fastest. They build up naturally over time and with player attacks. Wand Photon Blast inflicts both physical and elemental down factors, while the Talis Photon Blast focuses on inflicting elemental down factor over the physical one. Despite having better DPS, it is not advised to use Talis PB during elemental downs, as elemental down factor buildup is disabled during elemental downs. Element Weak bonus increases Photon Blast buildup speed by up to 25% when your attack element matches your enemy's elemental weakness. Because the only elemental part of Wand is the Photonic Fury, this skill doesn't boost PB buildup as well as it does on Talis, unless you're using an elemental weapon. Elemental Wands gain the full benefit of this skill. Since we're conditioned to elemental match anyway, it is pretty much an unconditional boost. However, this is your lowest priority skill and you shouldn't feel bad subtracting SP from this, in order to get other skills on your skill tree. Awake Ale increases Photon Blast buildup by another 25% when a tough enemy is nearby. Because this applies to both offensive and passive PB buildup, it is generally preferred over Element Weak bonus. However, it is a conditional boost that only applies during boss fights, which is arguably when you would need the faster Photon Blast buildup the most. Shifted Deban is our primary support ability. It increases damage dealt to enemies, and decreases damage taken by you and nearby players. Additional skills are available in order to extend the list of advantages, as well as making the process of keeping your teammates buffed up easier. Long-range Shifted Deban exists, but it is unnecessary. It's an alternative way of applying Shifted Deban, placing the field wherever you aim, rather than around you, but because of party share the skill doesn't add much. Rest of Field Techter increases the amount of health recovered when you use Rest of Signa, while also healing nearby characters. Even if you're a solo player, it's nice to have this skill, simply because Rest of Signa will recover more HP. Overemphasis recovers all HP and PP, as well as temporarily increases max PP for both yourself and other party members by 50. Unfortunately, we can't monitor our party's PP, but it's a cool skill to have regardless. Now, let's talk about some deeper game mechanics. Elemental matching defines tech-based classes in this game, with the exception of Waker. Generally speaking, matching technique and Photonic Fury elements with enemy weaknesses increases their potency by 20%. There are rare exceptions to this rule though. This boost isn't much for Photonic Furies since their potency is rather small, but it is significant on Talis and Wand Element Pursuit. In addition to the 20% damage bonus, matching elements also builds up elemental downs. Elemental downs are special stun phases that can be triggered by the player by matching elemental attacks to the enemy's displayed weakness. There are also physical downs which melee and ranged classes can inflict. Each attack has a certain down factor, which is the amount of points assigned to inflicting elemental and physical downs. Depending on the body part of the enemy, there are also down multipliers. Wakes probably already told you about this. The wand excels in applying both of them fairly equally, but can switch into applying physical downs at the same rate as other melee weapons, by revoking the element. Talis, on the other hand, builds up elemental downs at a faster rate than wand. For a detailed breakdown, I highly recommend using Deathcream's table, which I'll link in the description below. How do elemental weapons fit into all of this? Well, they're a little bit different. Each attack has a physical and elemental down factor, but elementless weapons only apply the physical down factor. An elemental weapon inflicts the elemental down factor on top of the physical down factor. Elemental weapons also have a hidden damage multiplier. Using an elemental weapon against enemies not weak to the element of your weapon boosts the damage by 10%, but using it against enemies weak to the weapon's element boosts it by 15%. This makes elemental weapons much stronger than you might think at a first glance. On wands, elemental weapons have a slightly weird interaction with our photonic furies. Usually when you revoke, you go back to an elementless photonic fury and lose the small damage bonus from matching elements. However, with an elemental weapon, elementless furies are replaced with the element of your weapon. This is both good and bad. Good because it allows some min-maxing with Revoke Pursuit. Wand weapon action cancels techniques, so it's slightly better to revoke your element directly after setting it, rather than the other way around, like you'd do on an elementless weapon. Bad because in situations where you'd rather focus on physical down buildup, you can't really do that anymore. You don't build elemental down factor during elemental downs, and usually the enemy weak point is exposed during a down. Weak points have a 50% down factor multiplier. So, a lot of potential physical down factor is being wasted without the ability to revoke your element. Overall, Techter has a lot of nuance with elemental matching. This is something you've got to experiment on your own, if you care about this level of min-maxing. I'll link the bestiary in the description below, since it will be your best friend on that min-max journey. In most cases this level of min-maxing isn't necessary, and I go over more details about it in the written version of this guide. Since most general-purpose weapons will be elementless anyway, the most important takeaway from all of this is that wand is pretty much the only weapon that has such seamless control over how much elemental and physical down it wants to inflict. It's something very unique to Techter. By the way, there is a way to boost elemental damage. The effect of crisp food gives you a damage multiplier of 5% to enemy weak spots. Now, this does sound like a heavy condition, but matching elements with enemy weaknesses is actually enough to trigger the effect. This basically means that your Photonic Furies, deployed Talis techniques, and Wand Element Pursuit deal 5% extra damage unconditionally. It is essential to always fight on a full stomach in NGS. In terms of subclasses, there unfortunately isn't much to talk about. The game actively disincentivizes the use of subclass weapons, so for this section I'll just be focusing on passive skills. Hunter offers tons of survivability. Hunter Physique reduces your damage taken temporarily, and gives hyper armor as well as barriers once the skill expires. On the other hand, Flash Guard reduces all damage unconditionally. How much mileage you'll get out of this subclass depends on your skill level. If you can't parry well, then face tanking might be preferential for you. However, I strongly recommend improving your parry skills as the game is very counter-focused. Fighter offers some damage multipliers that look great on paper, but fail in practice. Both down chaser skills only activate during physical and elemental downs, excluding special downs or breaks. Not activating during breaks hurts the most, since those are the big damage phases, and skills like Shift Effect Advantage do activate during breaks, so it's just weird that these fighter skills don't. Currently, Ranger is the worst subclass you can pick when it comes to subclass skills. The bad condition skills only protect you from receiving status ailments. The other two skills aren't going to improve your gameplay either. Gunner has some useful skills, but it is completely outshined by other classes. Attack PP Recovery and Overwhelm both boost active PP Recovery substantially, but Overwhelm doesn't work on bosses. These perks pale in comparison to Bouncer, Force, and especially Slayer. Force as a subclass is packing a lot of goodies that look more impactful than they actually are. Perhaps, the biggest benefit of it is that a lot of our skills overlap with each other. So, if your main class skill tree becomes too tight with the skill points, you can relegate some of them to the subclass. Additionally, it has a lot of tools that help you sustain your PP. PP Recovery Boost increases natural PP recovery by a substantial amount. It's a multiplier, so it balloons quite nicely with things such as Deb and PP Recovery Boost. However, natural PP recovery is halted very often throughout our gameplay, so we don't improve our PP economy as well as with the Slayer subclass. Eradication PP gain restores 5% PP when nearby enemies die. This is the main selling point of the Force subclass. It's a great tool to keep your PP up during PSE bursts. The fact that it is percentage-based means it will only get better as the average max PP increases. But its value drops each time there are improvements being made to Wand and Talis since they become more PP self-sufficient. United Technique Gauge Amplifier boosts the compound gauge buildup by a whopping 30%. It stacks with our version of the skill, so you'll be charging compound techniques faster than they cool down. However, the DPS increase from this skill is very minor. Braver has, perhaps, the most unfortunate lack of compatibility with wands, as Mighty Guard doesn't work with wand block counters, and many other block-related skills are main class exclusive. Resta Effect Amplifier and Break Fall HP gain are negligible, boosting your Resta Sign HP recovery, as well as recovering a portion of your HP when you recover from an attack that blew you away. Resta Sign PP gain restores a tiny bit of PP upon using a Resta Sign. Both Wand and Talis have really good PP economies and don't really need it. Bouncer has the same benefit as Force of allowing us to move some SP from the main class tree to the subclass tree. I would absolutely recommend using this subclass against enemies with destructible parts, or encounters that benefit from fast elemental and physical downs. Defeat Amplifier increases the elemental and physical down factor applied to your enemies. Wand benefits from both factors being boosted. Partial Destroy Advantage increases the damage that you deal, and reduces the damage that you take, according to the number of enemy parts destroyed on a single enemy. Not every enemy has destructible parts, hence why I recommend this subclass against enemies that do. Unfortunately, Waker doesn't offer much value with its subclass skills. It is basically a more RNG version of Hunter, but focusing more on the healing department. Slayer offers some really good value as a subclass. It increases the crit rate by 5% while also recovering 2 PP upon a critical hit. This by itself is a comparable damage increase to Bouncer's part destruction, while also improving PP economy against bosses significantly. I recommend this subclass for whenever the enemy has no breakable parts, but it performs nicely against enemies with breakable parts as well. TLDR, if you're playing Pure Wand or Talis, I recommend focusing on Bouncer and Slayer subclasses, depending on if the enemy has destructible parts or not. Force is a nice subclass to have for combat zone farming, but isn't mandatory. Other subclasses fall short in terms of what they have to offer for Wand and Talis. I'll link the skill trees down in the description below. And that's about it. Keep in mind though that for the sake of brevity this video is an abridged version of the text version of my guide. You can find the link in the description. If you have any questions, don't shy away from asking. Thank you for watching. I hope this guide was informative and you learned a few things from it. It was a long time coming. This is by far the most effort I've ever put into a video, and it was a lot of fun to put it together once I got the ball rolling. Special shout out to a fellow trickster, Ayland, for making all of these incredible high-res icons. Now that the video is done, every project I set out to do when starting this channel is finished. I wouldn't have come this far without any of you guys. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. It really means a lot to me that I'm able to produce content like this for you guys. I cherish every nice comment I receive, even the poopy ones. I'll continue to serve you as the dorky Techter girl, and hope we will continue to have fun together on this fantastic star. With that being said, I hope you'll have a fantastic day and I'll see you in the next one. Take care!